Have you ever wondered what truly happens inside a man's mind in those quiet moments after intimacy? What he feels, what he fears, and what he secretly hopes you'll understand but will never say out loud. After intimacy, a man often enters a psychological state that is far more delicate and complex than most people realize. What appears on the surface as calmness, silence, or even emotional distance is rarely a sign of withdrawal. Instead, it is a moment where his inner world becomes unusually open and his unconscious begins to speak louder than his conscious thoughts. Men are often conditioned to maintain emotional steadiness, to appear strong, composed, and unshaken, but intimacy quietly disrupts that facade. It lowers defenses that are usually held firmly in place, and because those defenses fall so quickly, his psyche instinctively reaches for something that restores balance, emotional grounding. This need for grounding is not dramatic or loud. It shows itself in subtle ways, the sort that Jung would describe as expressions of the deeper self, trying to stabilize after a moment of profound openness. When a man shares closeness with someone he cares about, he enters a state where his usual emotional armor dissolves. That temporary dissolving can feel liberating, but it also leaves him unusually vulnerable. The body may relax, but the mind becomes alert, scanning quietly for reassurance that this vulnerability is safe. He craves signals that the connection created in that moment is not fragile or conditional, that the bond remains intact even when the heightened emotions soften. He's not seeking verbal promises. It is not eloquent words or declarations that soothe him most. What he actually longs for is presence, the kind that requires nothing, demands nothing, but simply exists beside him. A soft touch on his arm, a calm breath shared in silence, a look that carries warmth without expectation. These tiny gestures serve as emotional anchors. They tell a deeper part of him that he is still valued, still accepted, and still understood, even after the intensity of connection fades into quiet. Jung taught that the unconscious responds strongly to symbol, and to a man, these simple gestures become symbols of safety. This desire for grounding is also tied to how men process emotions. Many men navigate feelings internally rather than externally. After intimacy, the emotional volume inside them increases, but their way of handling it is often inward reflection. They do not immediately articulate what they feel, not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening at once. Their instinct is to settle the waves before speaking. In this moment, grounding becomes essential. Without it, he may feel overstimulated, pulled between vulnerability and the need to regain composure. With it, he feels balanced enough to stay emotionally present rather than retreat into himself. Another layer of this craving lies in the contrast between the external expectations placed on men and the internal reality they experience. The world often tells men to be strong, controlled, and self-contained. Intimacy, however, invites them into softness, openness, and emotional exposure. This contradiction can create a psychological tension. In the moments after closeness, a man unconsciously seeks reassurance that stepping out of the role society assigns him will not cost him respect or acceptance. Emotional grounding helps bridge this tension. It comforts the deeper self that is tired of pretending, tired of carrying silent pressures, tired of hiding the parts that also long to be held. He also needs grounding because it confirms that intimacy was not a momentary escape, but a meaningful experience. The reassurance he craves is not about ownership or validation, it is about connection. When he feels grounded by genuine presence, he senses that the moment shared was real, reciprocal, and emotionally significant. This quiet confirmation strengthens his trust, both in the bond and in his own feelings. It allows him to relax into the connection rather than question it. Through grounding, a man feels safe enough to stay open instead of retreating into the protective instincts that have guided him for years. When he feels it, the vulnerability that intimacy awakens becomes something he can embrace instead of fear. After intimacy, a man often enters a space within himself that he rarely visits in daily life, a space where his emotional defenses lower without permission. This sudden openness can feel disorienting, not because he fears closeness, but because the experience exposes layers of vulnerability he usually keeps deeply guarded. In this softened psychological state, he secretly craves something profoundly simple yet rarely acknowledged: silent reassurance that his vulnerability is safe. This longing does not emerge from insecurity or emotional weakness. It rises from the unconscious, that hidden terrain Jung believed shapes most of our behavior without our awareness. During intimacy, a man gives more than his body. He gives access to parts of himself he does not show to the world. Even the man who carries himself with confidence and certainty becomes, in those moments, emotionally exposed. He lets go of control, allows instinct to guide him, and taps into something raw and human. When that moment passes, the unconscious reacts by searching for safety, not through words but through subtle cues. Silent reassurance becomes the bridge between his inner vulnerability and the external world he must return to. This reassurance often takes no more than gentle presence, a quiet atmosphere, a calm expression, a soft hand resting on him with no agenda. These small gestures signal to his deeper self that he is still accepted, still respected, still emotionally held. They soothe an ancient instinct that whispers to him to be cautious when vulnerable. Men are often taught from childhood to avoid emotional exposure, to be the ones who protect rather than the ones who need protection. When intimacy interrupts this learned pattern, the unconscious naturally seeks signs that such openness will not be used against him, judged, or misunderstood. What makes this reassurance silent is not that words are unwelcome, but that the unconscious responds faster to energy than to language. Jung emphasized that the psyche speaks in symbols, sensations, and subtle emotional signals. After intimacy, a man becomes highly sensitive to these signals. A slight shift in tone or body language can either calm him or deepen his internal tension. He is not analyzing these cues intellectually, he is sensing them instinctively. If he feels warmth, acceptance, and ease, his unconscious relaxes. If he perceives distance or abrupt withdrawal, even unintentionally, he might interpret it as emotional danger, causing him to retreat into himself. This does not mean he needs constant attention. What he craves is confirmation that the emotional opening he stepped into is respected. If he senses that the moment created a bond rather than a disconnect, he feels secure enough to remain emotionally present. Silent reassurance also gives him permission to transition slowly back into his usual mindset without feeling pushed, judged, or expected to behave a certain way. It serves as a protective cushion between his private vulnerability and the external identity he carries in the world. For many men, emotional trust is a fragile structure built over time. Intimacy amplifies this structure, making every gesture more significant. When he receives silent reassurance, it strengthens his trust not only in the relationship, but also in his ability to open up without fear. It helps him understand that his softness does not weaken the bond, it deepens it. This reassurance tells him that the emotional closeness he revealed is valued, not taken for granted. This craving is not something he can articulate easily. He may not even recognize it consciously, but his body knows, his expressions know, and the subtle shifts in his behavior reveal it. When he feels this quiet sense of safety, he becomes more affectionate, more consistent, and more emotionally available. His unconscious relaxes, allowing his deeper self to come forward without the protective shield he usually wears. Silent reassurance becomes a language of trust that speaks directly to his heart, even when no words are exchanged. After intimacy, a man often enters a deeply reflective emotional state where the meaning of the moment becomes more important than the moment itself. This is where his unconscious begins to work, and one of its strongest desires is the need for confirmation that the connection he shared was meaningful, not mechanical or fleeting. Men may not always express this desire directly, but it shapes their emotional reactions far more than most people realize. Intimacy opens a door inside him that he does not open often, and once it is open, he quietly looks for signs that what he experienced was genuinely valued by the person he shared it with. This need for meaning is rooted in how the masculine psyche processes closeness. A man may appear physically relaxed afterward, even quiet or still, but inside him something sensitive is shifting. He's asking himself questions he never says out loud. Did this matter? Did it deepen the connection? Did she feel what I felt? Not because he doubts his partner, but because intimacy brings him into contact with the parts of himself that crave significance. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious seeks purpose in every emotional exchange. And after closeness, a man instinctively tries to understand what the experience represents, not just what it was. This desire for confirmation does not come from ego, nor does it come from wanting praise. It comes from wanting to know that the emotional energy he invested was met with emotion in return. Men often attach meaning differently than women. For a man, the shared moment is not only about physical closeness, it becomes a symbol of trust, connection, and emotional depth. If he feels that it meant something to her through presence, warmth, gentle conversation, or even a simple look, he feels grounded, understood, and respected. But if he senses emotional distance afterward, even unintentionally, he may interpret it as the moment being less meaningful than he hoped. He does not need long conversations or emotional analysis. What he truly craves is emotional alignment. Small gestures that show appreciation or connection reassure him that intimacy was not a moment of convenience, but a moment of depth. Even silence can confirm meaning, as long as the silence is warm and connected. It is the emotional tone that matters, not the words. The unconscious responds to energy, and a subtle shift in that energy can strengthen or weaken the meaning he assigns to the experience. This is also tied to a man's fear of being seen as replaceable. After intimacy, the veil of confidence and composure he wears in daily life becomes softer. In that softness, he wants to feel that he mattered uniquely. When he senses that the connection had emotional value, he feels safe enough to stay open. If not, a protective instinct may rise within him, urging him to pull back emotionally to shield himself from feeling dismissed or insignificant. This reaction is rarely conscious. It is the psyche's attempt to protect the deeper self from disappointment. What many people don't realize is that meaning stabilizes the masculine heart. When a man feels that the moment touched both partners equally, it strengthens his sense of emotional security. It makes him more affectionate, more consistent, and more willing to share parts of himself he normally keeps hidden. It becomes easier for him to express warmth, humor, or sensitivity because he no longer worries that he invested his emotions into something one-sided. Confirmation of meaning also helps him integrate vulnerability in a healthy way. When he knows the moment mattered, the vulnerability he allowed feels worthwhile rather than risky. He learns that he can open up without losing his sense of self. Over time, these moments create a foundation of trust in the connection, trust in his partner, and trust in his own emotional intuition. This is why the meaning behind the moment becomes so important. It is not the act itself that affects him most. It is the emotional truth that follows. It reassures the unconscious, settles the heart, and reminds him that what he gave was received with the same sincerity in which it was offered. After intimacy, a man's unconscious shifts into a state where sensitivity heightens and emotional perception becomes sharper than usual. In this quiet and exposed space, what he secretly craves the most is emotional attunement, those subtle, almost invisible gestures that mirror what he is feeling inside. This attunement is not about dramatic affection or exaggerated expressions. It is about the delicate ways a woman responds to the emotional atmosphere between them. It is a psychological alignment that tells him, without a single word, that his inner world is being felt, not just observed. Jung often described attunement as a meeting of two unconscious minds, a silent exchange of emotional energy that goes far deeper than language ever could. Men often struggle to articulate their emotional states immediately after intimacy because the experience itself stirs up feelings that they are not used to navigating. The masculine psyche, shaped by years of conditioning, tends to process emotion internally before expressing it. This can create a momentary gap where he is still feeling deeply but does not yet know how to convey it. In this delicate threshold, emotional attunement becomes incredibly important. It reassures him that his partner intuitively senses where he is emotionally, even when he cannot explain it. A gentle shift in her tone, a calm presence beside him, or a soft touch communicates to his deeper self that she is connected to him, not just the moment. This craving for emotional attunement is rooted in the unconscious fear that intimacy is merely physical unless there is emotional alignment afterward. When he senses attunement, he feels understood, not intellectually, but emotionally. It tells him that she recognizes the subtle changes in his energy, the way his breathing slows, the quietness that settles over him, the softness that appears in his expression. Instead of misinterpreting his silence as disinterest, she responds to it with warmth and presence, and this makes him feel safe in his vulnerability. When a woman mirrors his emotional tone with sensitivity, she validates his inner experience. If he is quiet, she is gentle. If he is thoughtful, she is patient. If he is still processing, she does not rush him. This synchronized emotional response tells him that the connection is real, that what he feels matters, and that his vulnerability is not too heavy or too complicated. It grounds him in the sense that he is not alone in the emotional aftermath of such closeness. Emotional attunement also strengthens trust. When he feels that she intuitively understands him, he becomes more willing to open up over time. He may talk more, share more, and allow more of his inner world to surface. This is because attunement turns emotional exposure into emotional safety. It reassures him that he does not need to perform, explain, or hide. His partner connects to the deeper layers of him rather than relying on words or overt expressions to understand what is unfolding inside him. This form of connection also prevents misunderstandings that often arise after intimacy. Without attunement, silence can easily be misread as detachment, and a man might retreat further inward if he senses tension or confusion from his partner. But with attunement, silence becomes shared quiet, and reflection becomes shared presence. He feels the emotional harmony between them, and this harmony reduces the instinct to withdraw. Beyond reassurance, attunement also helps him integrate the emotional intensity of intimacy. It creates a gentle bridge between the vulnerable state he enters during closeness and the more grounded self he returns to afterward. When she responds to his emotional energy with subtle understanding, he experiences the moment as deeply meaningful rather than overwhelming. It becomes easier for him to navigate the transition from openness back to equilibrium without feeling disconnected or misunderstood. In this way, emotional attunement becomes a silent language of connection. It tells him he is seen, felt, and valued on a level deeper than words, allowing the bond created in intimacy to echo long after the moment has passed. After intimacy, a man's inner world becomes much more exposed than he usually allows it to be. And in that softened psychological space, he silently longs for something deeper than affection. He craves acceptance of his authentic self. This desire does not come from insecurity or the need for validation, but from a deeply rooted human instinct Jung often described. The longing to be seen without masks, without performance, without the roles that life forces us to play. In the aftermath of closeness, all the layers he wears in his daily life, the expectations, the responsibilities, the controlled expressions, fall away for a moment, leaving behind the true self that is rarely visible to the world. In this raw form, he hopes that what remains is enough. Intimacy reveals parts of him he can't hide behind strength or logic. It brings out the tender, uncertain, emotional aspects he has been trained to protect. Many men have spent years believing that they must always be composed, resilient, and unshaken. After closeness, however, those inner rules momentarily dissolve. In that dissolution, he craves acceptance not for the version of himself he presents to the world, but for the quiet, unguarded self that appears only when he feels safe. He hopes that the softness she sees is not judged, diminished, or misunderstood. He wants her to receive this authentic version with ease, with warmth, with a sense of, "I see you, and you're still enough." This craving for acceptance stems from the unconscious fear that vulnerability may lead to disappointment or rejection. Not in a dramatic sense, but in subtle ways, a shift in energy, a look that feels uncertain, or a tone that suggests discomfort. Men often carry the unspoken fear that once their vulnerability shows, their value decreases. So when intimacy reveals those hidden parts, he intuitively looks for signs that she embraces them. A gentle hand, a calm voice, or simply staying close becomes powerful reassurance. These gestures tell him that she accepts not just the confident outer shell, but the quieter emotional truth beneath it. Acceptance also matters because it strengthens his sense of identity within the relationship. When he feels accepted for who he truly is, he becomes more grounded. He no longer needs to overthink how he is perceived or how he should act. Authentic acceptance gives him permission to relax, emotionally and mentally, without the pressure to perform. This creates a foundation where he can be emotionally present rather than guarded. It becomes easier for him to express affection, communicate openly, and build deeper trust because he no longer feels the need to protect himself from being misunderstood. Beyond reassurance, acceptance helps him integrate his vulnerability rather than push it away. Instead of seeing his softer feelings as something to hide, he begins to see them as part of intimacy's emotional landscape. When she receives his authentic self with warmth, his unconscious learns that vulnerability is not weakness but connection. It becomes easier for him to access emotional honesty, which in turn strengthens the bond between them. He feels valued not only for what he does, but for who he is. This acceptance also supports his internal balance. After intimacy, emotions rise to the surface, and he needs to know that these emotions do not disrupt the connection. When she responds with acceptance, he feels grounded, understood, and emotionally safe. It reassures him that he does not need to retreat or rebuild his emotional armor. Instead, he can remain open, allowing the closeness to deepen rather than fade. In this way, a man's craving for acceptance after intimacy is not about ego, but about emotional truth. It is the desire to know that when he reveals his real self, without defenses, without roles, without pretense, he is still met with warmth, respect, and understanding. After intimacy, a man often enters a psychological space where he is both deeply open and quietly overwhelmed, and in this state, he craves something many people misunderstand: a balance of closeness and gentle space. This desire is not about pulling away or creating distance. It is about finding a moment to recenter himself while still feeling emotionally connected. Men often process emotions internally, and intimacy brings many of those emotions to the surface at once. The body relaxes, but the mind becomes more reflective, more aware of vulnerability, more alert to the emotional weight of the moment. Because of this, he needs a brief pause, a quiet breath, to gather himself, but he also needs to know that this pause does not jeopardize the bond he just shared. This space is often subtle. It may look like a moment of silence, a shift in posture, or a few minutes of quiet thought. It is not a withdrawal, it is a recalibration. Jung taught that the psyche seeks equilibrium after moments of emotional intensity, and intimacy is one of the most emotionally intense experiences a person can have. The masculine psyche, shaped by years of conditioning to stay composed, needs a moment to return to balance when those emotional guards lower. The space he craves helps him integrate the feelings awakened during closeness without becoming overwhelmed or shutting down. This is where the balance becomes essential. If the space he needs feels cold, abrupt, or disconnected, his unconscious may interpret it as emotional distance or dissatisfaction. That can trigger worry or withdrawal. But when the space is gentle, when she remains emotionally present even in silence, it creates an atmosphere of safety rather than separation. A quiet moment together, her calm presence nearby, or simply knowing she is still close becomes enough for him to feel held while he recenters. The space becomes supportive rather than isolating. He is not looking to be alone. He is looking to breathe. And that breath is much easier to take when he knows she is not misreading his quietness as rejection. Many men fear being misunderstood in these moments. They worry that their need for a short emotional pause will be seen as disinterest or detachment. Because of that, they may feel pressured to stay overly engaged even when their inner world needs a brief rest. When she understands this rhythm, when she allows that small space without taking it personally, he feels deeply respected. That respect becomes a form of emotional nourishment. Gentle space also allows him to re-establish his sense of identity after vulnerability. Intimacy momentarily dissolves his usual boundaries, the roles, responsibilities, and mental structures that guide his daily life. While that openness is meaningful, he needs a little time afterward to reconnect with his center. When he is given that time without tension, the transition feels natural and safe. He returns to emotional presence more fully and more genuinely. This balance strengthens the connection rather than weakening it. When he feels safe enough to take a moment for himself without fear of misunderstanding, he becomes more open in the long term. He shares more, expresses more, and becomes more emotionally consistent. The relationship benefits because his emotional energy is not drained. It is renewed through that brief pause. Gentle space also helps maintain harmony. Without it, a man may feel pressured or overwhelmed, which can lead him to retreat emotionally. But when the space is understood and respected, the vulnerability he felt during intimacy becomes integrated rather than suppressed. He can carry the emotional closeness forward rather than distancing himself from it. In this way, the balance of closeness and gentle space becomes one of the deepest unconscious needs men have after intimacy. It allows them to stay connected while also staying grounded, creating a bond that feels stable, safe, and emotionally real. In the end, what men secretly crave after intimacy is far more emotional than most people assume. Beneath the quiet, beneath the stillness, beneath the instinct to gather themselves, there is a deep longing for connection that feels safe, meaningful, and understood. They crave grounding because vulnerability unsettles them. They crave silent reassurance because it tells them their openness is safe. They crave meaning because they want to know the moment mattered. They crave emotional attunement because they hope to be felt, not just seen. They crave acceptance because intimacy reveals their most unguarded self. And they crave gentle space because they need a moment to return to balance without losing closeness. All these desires come from a place the conscious mind rarely accesses, the unconscious world Jung spoke of, where the deepest truths about human connection live. When these hidden needs are met with understanding and warmth, a man does not retreat after intimacy. He softens, he trusts, and he bonds on a level that lasts long after the moment is gone.